their claim is don't worry. It's almost like you remember when McAfee sold his company, and a lot of people swore to God that the antiviral software was the virus itself. People were claiming that. I don't know if you could kind of what your opinion is on that, but it seemed to be that the answer to the problem was the problem itself, and that seems to be where the AI is going right now, at least the way that they're rolling it out. And you're right, it's a completely disposable thing. So when I go back over
I had
here,
an interview with McAfee. Like during the COVID lockdown, he's like, "Hey, if you want to do an interview with me, just write me and I'll do an interview with you." And then I did. I wrote him and said, "Hey, John, I'd love to talk to you."
right?
And we got on an interview. It was about hour. No, it was a half hour. It's 30. Gave me 30 minutes. So we're talking about crypto and like, where the world's going and this sort of thing.
That's before the schwacking.
Before the schlacking, yes, indeed. Before he got arrested, even before that was even before that.
You know that
we talked about Guatemala for a minute and this sort of thing, and Honduras, and he was down in Belize and that sort of thing. Like, what's really going on with these places of the most ancient of societies, where at least the impression that I got from him was like, you understand Tikal and El Mirador and these more ancient cities. There used to be a connected grid of some sort of electricity. And the same thing, if you go into the Middle East, all these ancient sites are now desert. Before, if you look down on it from a satellite view, it looks very much like a grid board, like a circuit board from now. Whole thing is, he sort of alluded to these things are sort of being reconstructed and reconnected for some electrical purpose to try to bring back an earth grid, something like that, in addition to the crypto and the blockchain running on top of that. So if you think about layering, like the most ancient of our civilizations were the bedrock of the electrical system for that interoperability of the entire Earth's electrical grid, much like we have electrical grids today in big cities and all these things. But we're in a different place. Like a lot of these places we're in now are vegetative zones, where the old ancient civilizations are in desert zones. So if you really look on top of this, there's thousands of photos where they'll look down on an ancient city that's in the desert and they'll compare it with the circuit board of modern day circuit board. Or if you go into some cathedrals and what looks like a labyrinth is nothing more than a circuit board. And they compare all these things through history here. But somehow with the rainfall patterns coming back, a lot of these places are going to become viable again, because you're not looking like, when we think about electricity, what we have been programmed with, it's copper wiring. It's not, it's water. Water is the conduit that powers most of these things. Salt water, even better. But we've been trained to think that it's always copper wires, silver wires, electric solar panels, electric, silver wiring. But what if it's water that connects the biggest and the most large of what would can be considered power capacitors on the planet? It's not wires. Wires would be minuscule in comparison to rivers, underground aquifers, underground oceans. This is the sort of direction that he was taking it in our talk, but he wasn't specific about it. But now, years after this, I understand what he was trying to tell me, or at least allude to me going in that direction. And look for the clues, dude. You got some basic knowledge. You're not enough to be dangerous, but you just don't know shit. Get over there and learn yourself, is kind of the way he was pushing me off on a lot of answers and things. So I'll leave it there. McAfee, brilliant guy. I do believe Monero is still the way to go if you're going to try to transact anonymously after we get into this track and trace thing. If you're going to still do online, you're still going to need Monero. It's the number one most liquid. You can go to like Zcash and Pirate Chain too, but if you're looking at liquidity, you're going to go to Monero first. Oh, by the way, if you're looking for something like that, FYI. But McAfee, he was a genius in himself. Like, this guy was too freedom oriented. He was so outside the system that he wanted to break humanity away from the system. And that was his downfall, is like, I'll compare him also to Nikola Tesla. Like the understanding he had of how technology could be harnessed to break away from this dark power that was trying to envelop us. His whole mission was to break us away, just like Tesla was, and Marconi as well. And Dr. Brown with electrogravitics and things got, he swooped up everything, CIA and all the different secret programs that electrogravitics fell under after that. So if you want to go back in history, when you look at people who were trying to give us clues and indications on how you can break away from the civilization, he was one of them. And I give him kudos for his brilliant mind on that. I really think he was one of the top 10 minds of our at least century that existed at that time. Like the way he understood, and he gave us the clues. Don't trust your antivirus software. They're inventing the viruses to get you to buy that stuff. I'll leave it there, man. I'm rambling.
Yeah, it seems like that's exactly what's going on with, all of the other options in life, like health, robotics, AI. The cause is the problem. The problem is the cause. It's more than a problem reaction solution. It's created and designed from the beginning. And, I think that that's why, in my opinion, that we're moving to these kind of revolutionary ideas like nuclear reactors on the moon. We're ready to expand this technology out to where it never gets crushed again. And when you talk about these ancient civilizations and all the seemingly power orientated rock uh, buildings and megalithic sites, from the pyramids all the way to like South America. You see these things that indicate that maybe, they had some kind of concept of the magnetic field and the interaction. And for all I know, that all of that was a worldwide network grid. These are the same people that, for the most part, knew about red ochre and protecting their skin. A lot of them indeed use that. So it's not too outlandish to think that possibly they understood cosmic rays or radiation coming from space, and they were attempting to protect themselves. And last week you brought up this idea about these people putting seeds in and being charged up with different charges and things like that. That's literally exactly what some of the Neolithic people were doing with some of these megalithic sites. Is they would put seeds under it, believing that some kind of phenomenon was happening to the seeds, some kind of charge of some kind of energy that would make them grow better and their crops do better and all of that stuff. So it was real similar to what you were talking about with that other experiment where they were putting seeds and stuff under charges, or maybe plants or something like that. I forgot exactly what you
Yeah,
said.
electroplates. Penny Kelly was telling me about this, where the person she had studied under, they were looking at different energies that are exuding out of the earth that spin in a vortex and create different formations. Crop circles would be a good way to say it, but that's maybe the worst way to say it. Not that the geometrical shapes were there in terms of like popping in and making all the circles and all the hexagons and triangles or whatever, but it was more about the vortices that come out of certain areas on the planet create shapes around them that could be either the quintessential crop circle itself or confused with others. So this is where you get into it. And the electrical difference and the potentiality of electrical difference between those two, when they found that the seeds that they harvested out of those areas, after they grew them again, had a completely different plant coming out of it. So they're like, okay, let's narrow this down. It's either going to be plasma or it's going to be electricity, one of the two, A or B choice. So they got different plates and they put different electrical charges into the plates on the substrate there. And it was just literally copper plates. And they put a charge into it. They changed the voltage, amperage, and they did a bunch of different experiments. But what they found was they could revert seeds back to the original way back before. So if you're looking at a corn stalk that comes up and you got maybe 5, 6, ears coming off of that, some of the reversions that they did with the electroplating was 20 ears coming off a single stalk. Like these things, yeah, cymatics, and that was something different. But putting electricity into the seeds really changed it. I mean, incredibly changed the output of the species. So the question was, and this is what really got them in trouble, was Have the seed companies been electroplating on reversion downward to try to reduce crop yields? Because if you can do electroplating and revert upward, had they through the last 50 to 70 years understood the same technologies after World War II with the electrovitics and all these things that the Germans had applied and figured out electric wise on how to raise objects and become weightless with them. Had they taken that same technology to revert, they sold us all these herbicides, they sold us all these fertilizers, and they told us all these things. 1950s Green Revolution, and we did get higher crop yields, no doubt. But at the same time, were they tweaking the seed supply to revert it back down? Instead of a 20-ear yield on corn, they would give us 6 ears, but with more fertilizer in there, the ears would become larger on that, and we would appear that we had a larger crop yield. Also tapping us and limiting us to the amount of food we could grow on the planet. The obvious question, are you on shrooms? Illuminated shrooms, combining 6 powerful mycelium in a Fulvic mineral delivery system, selected for their synergistic, restorative, and protective actions. Potent. And please remember, ladies and gentlemen, every purchase you make helps keep this podcast on air. So please remember that link's in the description box below. And are you shrooming? This is one of the things, you can take it for whatever you think it's worth, but it's a valid discussion. It truly is. Because, you talked about that, Ransom, with the nanobots in there, and they're going to repair telomeres on the body. Could they not damage and rip apart telomeres and shorten lifespan? Well, same thing. If you're going to electroplate seeds, could you electroplate them downward or upward? Both valid. Both valid.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is a double-edged sword. The reason I kind of put up this cymatics image is because you were talking about these, like I said, there's been a lot of stories that possibly they were putting seeds under these Neolithic sites to charge them just almost in the exact same way that you're talking. But you have to remember, these are all waveforms: electricity, sound, light. At a certain vibration, we find out that they make these, perfect, well, not too perfect with the sand there, but if they do it at the right frequency, you get these sacred geometry things, and you're only looking at a slice of it. So this is just a slice of 2D, but the shape and the waveform is actually in a three-dimensional shape. So if these ancient people knew these ideas, which obviously they did, because when you go to a lot of the ones in England and like Sardinia and different things, they had a specific acoustic pitch along with the quartzite rock shapes and different things. So they were at least touching on this knowledge of an invisible three-dimensional waveform that came from different energies, not just light and vibration, sound, but you get these different shapes. So I'm sure that a lot of the crop circles were man-made and copies. However, if you could get an electromagnetic waveform shape that made a vibration, you would get exactly the sacred geometry shapes right into whatever field it was or crop it was. You would get that exact thing. And I think that these ancient people knew it. And that's where you get some of these stories. Because, if you get the right resonance and the right shape, you can literally make things fall apart. And I think this is somehow related to how they built and moved these large rocks. You get stories out of the Bible, like, when they walked around the temple there so many times, and then they blew their horn and they had the
That's
Ark of the
exactly it.
Covenant
Yeah,
with
I
them,
was going to say
and it
same
just
thing.
fell
The
apart,
walls
right?
fell down.
And you get the same thing kind of with earthquakes, tsunamis, and different things. You get these waveforms that are just either non-destructive or destructive. So if they could figure out kind of what that is, which I think these, elite circles of people have all of this documentation of these secret societies and secret teachings all the way back to the Magi and before that, because, Buddha was described as a magi too. So he was a traveling magi that went there, and he captivated the room wherever he went because people recognized that he knew some of these secrets of things
Christ
like
too.
sacred
He went to
geometry.
India.
Right. So they knew this stuff, and now it's coming back out. in a technological format, but they're not sharing it just like they didn't share it in the past. Only the elite circles, and I think this is where this is going to end up, and it answers some of the questions to us. Kind of like when we talk about consciousness and different things like that. There's a certain pattern, and if that pattern happens, you get that existence out. So that's why I've put forth, several times the idea that I think AI is a universal constant. At some point, any species that is looking into sacred geometry and circuits and zeros and ones is going to come across that exact pattern that enables artificial intelligence. So I would think that the same things would be true for healing and all of these other things, and that's why I was kind of saying earlier that we're at a crossroads where the elite are kind of showing us in our face that they do have the keys to the kingdom, but you literally almost have to sell out your freedom, sovereignty, soul, you might say, to access these transhuman ideas, and it kind of begs the question: what or how long of an intermediate age do they need to get to the point where they're just growing human beings with synthetic DNA, and that they have a whole, I forgot what the word is. Earlier you were talking about eugenics. That's actually whenever you purposely manipulate gene lines to get a beneficial result or a perceived beneficial result. And I forgot what the name for it is, but there's an opposite of that, right? So there's programs designed literally, like you were talking about with the seeds, to decrease efficiency, maybe even IQ, health, longevity, lifespan, all of these things. And now they have the keys to the kingdom. And what they're basically doing is setting up the scenario where you have to choose one or the other. But I don't think that they're going to let the masses of the population actually enjoy in any of these technologies. It's just there to build the system. And now that they have the system almost complete, that's when they pull the rug out of everybody and hit system reboot. And once that system reboot, you
Well,
have to have the old one destroyed all the way.
well, I'm going to say there's unequivocally a different factor at play, because if the system worked, they would continue letting the system work indefinitely. There would be no reason to reboot. If everything was functional the way it was, why would you ever change the system? If it worked for the last 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, and it was still functional, why would you stop it and change to a different system? Unless there's something else as a factor coming inbound that's going to disrupt that system. I'm saying it's the cosmic rays, galactic cosmic rays. There's going to be awareness built in the cloud cover and the cloud building with those galactic cosmic rays. There's like a twofold with this. It awakens human consciousness, but at the same time, it builds more clouds. Clouds decimate and reduce food production. So at the same time, and then you get this awareness of, why is our food decreasing? Why is food more expensive? The economy just gets disrupted completely. And now you have three factors at play. Now, if you could front run this, try to control humanity as this sweep was coming in. Now, you got to be kidding me if you don't think all governments around the world looked at those two bare eye supernovas and go, through the last 5,000 years of recorded history, every time we see one of them, it disrupts society. Now we got two up there. Oh, and by the way, we're going into a grand solar minimum, and our magnetic field's weakening and depleting to the lowest it's been in the last 12,000 years. I wonder what's going to happen.
Well, I
You
think
really
that
need to leave. That's just like the baseline to operate off of. So be that person and be in that room with that conversation.
well, I think that's
Undisrupt society. There's two up there, and we got a depleted magnetic field that's somewhat where near the lowest in the last 12,000 years. Now, run this scenario with me. What would you do as a government to try to quell panic? I guess.
well, I think what you said was the key to the whole situation here is the thing that's in this system that doesn't work is human consciousness and awareness. And that's what's being attacked. First, you have to basically streamline the population and then only give it so many choices. It's just like experiments done with mammals where, they only give them a certain outcome, and then they were trained to do that outcome. That's what they're doing to the human. I think that's the key, and why we have to reset is because we came to a point where human consciousness and awareness, and it is kind of like that. You brought that up last week, the 100 monkey phenomenon, if that's a real thing. And I think really it is. but it's more like a mass awareness or consciousness change. And that might be similar to the shifts we see in what they call evolution. At some point, all of a sudden, boom, you got all these different species. And we were talking about that last week. We know that cosmic rays and solar radiation plays a big part in that. And it seemed like the ancients were just about to get on the cusp of this idea. And that's why you had these, the red ochre things. You had the network of Neolithic and megalithic stone structures everywhere. They were just getting to that point. They were understanding psionic, or what is it, cymatics there.
Cymatics, yeah.
They understood that because they put it in carvings right in the rock in these structures where there's a specific tone that does something to the human psyche, and it puts it into a meditative state. So if you get humans all over the world that now have what amounts to cabin fever, there's nothing new under the sun. You even got the biggest sci-fi writers and movie makers literally saying they can't come up with nothing new because reality has surpassed them faster than their imagination, and now we're adding artificial intelligence into the mix. That must be the key to it, is that the awareness reached to too big of a state. And I think that's happened over and over again. You get these libraries, like we often mention the Library of Alexandria. It was a place in the world where people could go and gain ancient knowledge of their ancient past then, and it all got erased, censored, and now we see in the new sort of reset era, they're destroying every bit of that ancient stuff except for specific things that go along with the narrative that they have for human origin. And if we're aware about other things, then we would become more aware about human origin and where we're going, and some of these transhuman ideas no longer seem feasible to continue the human as we know it. So obviously that's not what they're doing. They have another idea planned.
Please remember civilizationcycle.com, and also buy me a coffee /civilization cycle.